I would like to introduce the Aurovillians who will be taking part in the panel. You already know our guests, Ravi, Jenny, Mark, and Ram. And so we have Bindu, who is a writer and sustainability consultant. We have Ribu, who works at Wasteless, who is a team member of Wasteless. We have Lara, who is a co-director of the Auroville Earth Institute. Oak from the Upcycling Studio. She was a key part in the Trash and Show last night. And yeah, finally we have our facilitator, Sanjay Prakash, who is an architect by background, and with a commitment to environmentally friendly architecture and also people's participation in various forms of design. But more than that, I've just found out that Sanjay Prakash was there at the dawn of Auroville. So he was there in 1968, and he is with us here now, 50 years later, to facilitate this panel discussion. So thank you.
Yesterday I was called an Aurovillian by an Aurovillian, which is a great honor in one sense, even though I don't live here. But really the question that seems to be on the top of my mind is that today's talks have mostly centered around physical, tangible assets, whether it's energy or water or agricultural practices and so on. So food figured in it. And so are we talking about drawing harmony from the diversity of influences that we have in the technological sphere, or are we also talking about harmony that we can draw out from the social cohesion that we create as a set of diverse people, 2,500 diverse people? And that's really the first provocation that I'd like to put to anybody in this panel.
I think about harmony and diversity is animals instinctively know their place. They know how to come into that harmony. And I think what we're called upon now in this Anthropocene era is a leap of consciousness, is this evolution of consciousness. And we're asked to do as human beings intuitively what animals do instinctively.
I think in Auroville we're very disharmonious, and we end up fighting a lot. I can say from the personal experience in the waste space, we argue about which is the best way forward, and reflecting on some of the presentations and what Ginny said about resilience and that we need to, this collective collaboration is required. I think what this conflict and disharmony has introduced in me is a kind of self-reflection and quietness to look at my own kind of inabilities to deal in this collective agreement. And what we see is that when we give that collective agreement the space and time it needs, and that internal reflection, the solutions become better and get wider community support. So for me, that's been a really important process.
Harmony doesn't necessarily mean no conflict, or maybe it does for some. But I think no conflict is not possible, really. And harmony is also possible. So I think they have to be both coexisting. Yeah.
Something that came up for me in the course of these discussions was something about changing from this old model way of thinking, the relationship between the individual and the natural environment, right? And Bindu is talking a bit about the classic niche construction. The animal impacts its environment, the environment impacts the animal, and then there's a kind of co-evolution that happens. So I feel that we're in a bit of a period of time in which we're looking at a major paradigm change in the way that we as human organisms, in a highly kind of cognitive, overdeveloped kind of way, re-look at the way in which we impact our environment impacts us, going from, like the old ecology model is you have the hydrological cycle, right? The rainwater comes down and hits the ground and then it's absorbed into the roots, and you have transpiration and the water comes up. But we always think of these things in these closed loop cycles, but we're maybe And I would just sort of put it out there that we're maybe in this paradigm shift of looking at much greater systems of complexity and trying to understand how to kind of cognitively manage those things as the physical environment. We understand the physical environment with greater and greater complexity, and that our social systems and ways of interacting, the way in which technology changes our social systems, is creating much more complex feedback systems in which we look at how much more emergent relationship of individual and environment.
I was living here for last 10 years. It's the time to seek harmony from diversity, because in Auroville we have many people from many countries, and so without that, and I think human being instinctively we want to have in peace, and to be in peace we need to make harmony from diversity. So that's my last 10 years.
That's beautiful. I will add two brief perspectives. The first off is that, in a sense, I'm sorry to hear about the challenges with finding harmony here in a place like Auroville, where, coming from the outside, of course, when I first heard about Auroville, before I knew anything about it, when I first heard about it, and before I started learning some about it, I thought, wow, it must be a wonderful place where everybody's walking around peaceful and joyous all the time. And then Matthias and Aditi told me, no, it is a wonderful place. But what I'd say about that is that actually that message in and of itself gives a message of hope and promise to the outside world, because look at what you have accomplished, despite the fact that there are challenges of what feels like disharmony here. And the outside world, of course, has its tons and tons of disharmony, and sometimes we feel like that's in the way of accomplishing things. But look at what you have accomplished. And that brings me to the second quick point I wanted to make, which is that I rest a lot on knowledge that I've gained or insights that I've gained from 30 years of training in Aikido. It's a Japanese art of the art of harmony, or the art of harmony with energy. And there comes the understanding that conflict is, even though harmony is desired, conflict is often inevitable. But there are two principal ways of dealing with conflict. There's the smash them down way of dealing with conflict, and there's the way that we call a positive somatic imprint, which means however you touch somebody, you basically want to leave them feeling more balanced in the end. Somebody's attacking you or somebody's off principle from you because there's a difference in balance. And whatever strength you have goes into restoring balance, even if it's a de-escalation, even if it's laying them flat on the ground so that they're not attacking you, it's restoring balance. And that's the sense that I have here, is that though you may have a sense of disharmony, you have such a common sense of a common goal that disharmony is constantly used to give positive somatic and positive psychic impressions on each other. And I think that's, from one day of quick impressions, what I would hope that you continue to be blessed with in this community.
I think what stops us from thinking of harmony is we think ourselves as fixed units, and somebody said that we are just an assemblage of things, as we're not one fixed person. Even in terms of DNA, we have many, many strands of DNA from across globes, across, and we are an assemblage of ideas, of memories, this idea of fixed identity, which makes us think, this is me and this is you. That separation is from thinking oneself as a fixed identity, I think. And so shedding that is important for me. And then the second thing is that I don't think, for me, harmony is not a resolution of differences, but a relationship with differences. So how do you think of yourself vis-a-vis the differences in the world? Because, in some senses, the diversity is the reason of evolution. Diversity is the cause why the dialectic of evolution takes place. It's through that interaction with the diversity. So, as she said, it's a constant dynamic process of shifting. And the third thing is about the position of humility, I think, which we need to adopt, not only vis-a-vis other human beings, but vis-a-vis everything else around us, what we call objects and non-objects and trees. And so this thing of this, it's a positional thing for me rather than a resolution of something.
A question that keeps coming to my mind is that kind of at the macro level especially, there's entrenched interests with a great deal of power maintaining, a certain difficult, destructive poise. And so it's kind of like it's not mental. We can think, like things should be like this, and we can kind of idealize about how things should be better and we can do this or that. But how do you deal with this element of the human nature, whatever, that clings on to power and influence in a destructive way?
I guess it's 2 or 3 levels in which this can probably, and I can only talk from my experience. One, there is this shift that happens in a presence. If they are in the presence of somebody which has an absence of this, there is an impact. That which in the Indian system of knowledge we call it pratyaksha. Here it happens. I have seen it with government officials happening even here. You got to get them to walk with Jaws for an hour in the morning. The only condition I have with them is walk in silence, listen to him, be with him. At the end of which, around breakfast, you have a discussion with them. You find that there is already a shift. It might come out as a feeling guilty. It might come out as feeling helpless. It might come out in any way. But it does. The challenge, of course, is what are the processes we have to sustain it within them, because they go back to the ecosystem which reinforces the destructive nature and the power structure. So that is out of our control. That which is within our realm is at least give a glimpse of a process where either through a pratyaksha or through an ecosystem, somehow there is a capacity to at least show that there is an alternative possibility or another truth, maybe.
I mean, I feel that that system is in the process of its really most painful death throes right now, and that's why we have people like Trump in power. And that we have every day demonstrations of how a 15-year-old girl will speak truth to the President of the United States and put him in his place. And, as the various different governance structures with entrenched patriarchal control systems have continued to try to hold on to the status quo, it's actually created such a bleed out that in the last, 1, 2, 3 years, we're seeing so much, the sort of explosion of the old system, a whole huge wave of women saying, hey, sorry, but I'm not actually going to accept the kind of physical invasion in a male-dominated system with abuse scandals. There has been, this recent wave of young children saying, hey, look, we're also part of a decision-making process because this gun control debate relates to us. There's, in the course of the last decade, so many different race-related situations that have blown up into very large, widely distributed public and social debates that bring into a broader consciousness the understanding of what diversity really means and how we have to continue to redefine those ideas of diversity, and when we make it more diverse, then see, in fact, actually we're still excluding people. And I don't know. I mean, I think that things are going in a really good way, and in some ways seeing how bad things are says a lot about how things are changing and how much the entrenched system has to fight to fail to keep that power out. Maybe just the last thing is I just wanted to acknowledge that even the Bridge conference itself has, some people have said there are certain panels where there are a lot of male-dominated and so forth and so on, but like there's some really powerful women that have taken a role in organizing this, and and the more we bring women into decision-making, coordinating processes, the more we have totally different ways of thinking that actually not only like respond to the old system, but actually reinvent a new type of system, and that will continue to grow.
So I'm not going to get provoked into the gender debate, but what I could do is to go back to certain writings of Sri Aurobindo and talk about something quite different. There was a situation where biological life, as we understand it, stems from extremely few, a very minimalistic series of set of chemical sources, right? I mean, four bases, 20 proteins, that's a very small number. And it creates all the biodiversity that we know in this world. All the 8.4 million species that populate this planet. All of them unable to reproduce except within their own species. All of them creating new DNA all the time. So there is almost a sense of underlying unity creating diversity, and the harmony really lies in this whole dynamic between that unity and diversity, which is what I suppose, I think Sri Aurobindo has said somewhere, the secret of life lies in the harmony between unity and diversity. How does that reverse this whole argument, and how does that apply to Auroville or to some of the initiatives that we've heard of today?
And the credit I'm going to give is building on what Laura is saying, and not just the powerful women who came together and organized this, but the powerful young children who were born and brought up here. We have Ribu sitting here, and the organizers Aditi and Suryamai. Because honestly, what we, the previous generation or generations older than me, they came from parents who were still entrenched in differences and diversities. Oh my gosh, I mean, think about trying to get French and Germans to agree, or the French and the English, and forget even the East-West divide with the Indians, or even what I experienced, the way people tend to put you in a certain bracket because you happen to be an Indian woman. And I think these children, well, they're not children anymore, but these young adults are living proof that life actually somehow tends to transcend its own differences. Because I think most of these people here are really wonderful human beings.
I think at an individual level, one can relate to that. But at a social and a political level, we are far away from that place right now. In terms of differences of how the world is right now, in differences of powers of all sorts, even powers of I mean, we are locked in all kinds of power relationships, whether we are aware of them or not aware. As men, we are not aware of power relationships with women. As human beings are not aware of the power relationship with nature. And as people, we are only marginally aware of the power relationship with the corporates hold over our lives. For example, we use IT all the time, but 5 of the biggest companies are all trillion-dollar companies, own most of the capital, all the information about us. So I think it is not an equal world in a political and social way. And I think that's what we need to strive towards. But that doesn't mean at an individual level, we don't have a process where at another level of awareness or consciousness, we can strive towards that. Maybe at some point both of them meet. Maybe as Bernard Shaw talked of man and Superman, maybe at some point we all meet at that point of elevated consciousness. But in the world outside, we are far away from it right now.
The secret of life lies in the harmony between unity and diversity. So Sri Aurobindo says that in his massive wisdom. I would have phrased that very differently in my considerably lesser wisdom, that harmony arises in the space between unity and diversity. To me, then, this unity and diversity that we separate out so much, and finding the space between those is where harmony, to me, arises. But I think Sri Aurobindo was seeing far beyond that, and that hits me, the way that this is said, that the secret of life arises in the harmony between unity and diversity. And thinking about what that means is that we strive so much towards one or towards the other. And if we look at our own behavior, we tend to grasp either onto making everything one, simplify it, or splitting everything up. And somehow or another, he sees that there's a harmony between these two. And I think it's this harmony between what the one wants and what the community wants. Maybe this is part of the secret of the steps forward in Auroville, is this understanding and commonly wanting this harmony. But I think that I don't have an answer for any of your question in this, but I think that thinking about what's said there, and maybe paraphrasing that around, and thinking about really harmony arising in this space between unity and diversity might help us as a step towards understanding what was really meant in that beautiful statement, and coming a step closer to the secret of life there.
I was living there almost 50 years in Korea. We developed our last 20 or 30 years. But I can say it's very structured society. We don't allow much like a variety. And so everybody wants to go good university and to have a good job. Okay, you couldn't hear. To have a good job. And we study from morning to night. That's the reality. And I don't want to put my children into that education system, so we came here and we learned about the differences, like what we are saying about diversity, kind of. And in Auroville, and I want to change my life stage, because I had very good time in Korea. I built my good career in my social life and etc. We had very good time. It's more than 100 mark. But we want to have different life. What we found in India, that there is variety, different life. That's why we are here, and that is the unity and the diversity. I found that unity in Korea, and I found diversity here. And in the matter of diversity, why I choose this, I found different life than Korea. And we have many people from many countries. I face in almost every day, different culture, and from this different culture that maybe I can make other people feel bad or like that. Because I also have that kind of feeling. Sometimes I feel bad because from their attitude. We have different. How I understand from this situation that it's like from different culture. Then my anger is disappearing, or my anger is getting small. So this kind of is happening here in Auroville, what I've learned, and I'm using that back like that. So I don't know. It's different structure of society or people's mind, behavior. I cannot make a definition, but I have experienced that one between like a unity and diversity.
How would you establish trust? That is a word I didn't hear so much here. Being confident on individuals, being confident on groups. We are facing this in Auroville. I believe it's valid everywhere. So being confident, without confidence, without trust, there will be almost always chaos. So what would you advise?
We are speaking of a collective consciousness, and yet we're kind of missing something that is seeing what consciousness is, the spirit that's behind. And we kind of, what I see happening is that we kind of push it to the individual responsibility, that we're all doing our own yoga, we're all doing our own inner work. But I think that in Auroville in particular, we have to understand that there is a collective consciousness at work. It's there despite us, whether we're doing yoga or not. It's there all around the world, and it's manifesting all these problems we have. And we don't do good, even here in Auroville, with actually coming together to go deeper into consciousness, into this spiritual consciousness, not just the mind understanding and sharing knowledge, which is all good and important. We gather very well socially, we gather very well in education forums, talking. We gather in many ways, but I don't see us gathering to truly go deeper on another level, which is not just about the individual going to another level, but the collective coming together to rise above or to go deeper, whatever word we want to use. So I just want to offer that to the space and to the group, to the panel, to see how can we infuse more of that into this exploration. Because I think you're going to find that when we go deeper in that sense, that will infuse the answers into the problems that we're having. And it will start to become more clear, because there's some truth there that we're missing, and it needs to become more realized. And actually, Auroville is the place for it. It's told in our charter, in our essence, which is unity through diversity. It's a part of our essence, but we don't get to unity unless we go deeper. We're still on the surface, and we have to make the effort, even if we make mistakes and we're not perfect, we have to make the effort to go deeper.
I'm a fundamentalist. I just wanted to ask how many more of you are fundamentalists in this room?
How do you establish trust and confidence when there's chaos? Fantastic question. I have no idea. What I do is I ignore everything else and just focus on garbage. So I narrow my focus, and that's chaotic too. The collective consciousness, I definitely agree that we need to dig deeper. This is something I really tangibly try to do in the work that I do every day. And yesterday was an example of that, and I love seeing it at the Trash and Show, is getting 60 people to dig in waste bins, see their plastic, wash it, do something with it, put on a dress, and be confident to share that experience with people on stage. And through there, I think individually we're digging on a deeper consciousness on the level of plastics and marine debris. But I don't think we're doing enough. And I'm a fundamentalist too. If you're talking about waste,
I believe that now I'm going to set of beliefs, right? There's no empirical evidence about what I'm saying. It's I believe, if that's good enough, that, it's like sculpture. You put it in the room and it changes the room. It doesn't say anything. I believe that if a set of people come together who strongly believe in what they believe in, they have the power to change things in ways they do not know how they will change it. And somehow you acquire power by believing in it sincerely and honestly about what you believe in. And if you do that as a collective, I think it has its own force. I don't know what that force is, and I don't even know if your biggest contribution to the world will be on sustainability technologies or garbology. It could be all of these things as well. But this could also happen in many other places. But then you also have a set of beliefs which is bigger than just that. You have set yourself, I think, a certain mission for yourself in your own inner lives. So when all of you do it together, and this is my belief, I think it's like sculpture in the room. It acquires a power which is unknown, can only be felt. So maybe you should just believe in doing it and see how it goes.
One experience in the United States that people are dealing with is big misinformation campaigns of all kinds, fake news, right? And people don't trust the government. People don't trust the private sector. And so people are turning to their local communities, turning to relationships where they do trust, and those smaller scale communities or different kinds of communities are becoming more important, right? In the face of mistrust of a lot of systems and people and institutions and organizations. So I think the question about trust is so important, obviously, and when we mistrust, we can be paralyzed to collaborate and connect in the ways that we need to. So it's at the core. So I think it's a great question, and others may have other things to say about that. But I think it connects possibly to the other question about external possibilities. I see, again, as someone who's relatively new learning about Auroville, huge potential, so much curiosity the rest of the world may have about Auroville and the experiential learning and the innovations, and I think there's a lot of potential there. And I think part of this conference, the intention is to explore some more specific outcomes later on in the week of things that we'll be continuing this discussion. We also had a discussion earlier about academic kind of publishing versus news, other kinds of forms of communication. And again, with maybe this is a connection I was just thinking about with the fake news reality, anyone can write anything. So in that world, perhaps the kind of peer-reviewed academic literature actually plays another service that it didn't play before. And I also just wanted to mention about the previous discussions we were having about kind of practical experiential learning and then the more academic theoretical discussions. And I think here in Auroville, the practical lived experience and all the work and is in and of itself the mission or the goal, or those aren't the right words perhaps. But I think in my own experience is that universities and kind of the theoretical academic discussions are becoming more focused on learning by doing. So learning by doing and experiential learning is rising in prominence worldwide. People realize that that's how human beings learn most. I mean, of course, we learn from books, and that's a great way to transmit ideas to each other. But we learn by doing, and those are experiences are always the most valuable ways of learning, and I think there's a greater acknowledgement of that. So I think there's potential, there's meeting of, I don't think the divide between the practical and the theoretical or the experiential and the academic is as vast or big as it used to be. So there's movement on both sides, perhaps.
Very well said. I'm somebody that's working in the area of like hands-on education, right? That's bridging between the theoretical and the practical, and it's something that really inspires a lot for me, what you just said. But I'm kind of grappling with a couple of different things. But I mean, I think I mean, in Auroville and at large, we're definitely looking at what are the types of social interaction systems that actually bring us as individuals into better participatory processes that allow us to make ourselves vulnerable within groups and to find ways to co-develop that shared principle, right? Because we can talk about the existing collectivity that's happening in Auroville and that, you know, it's all linked to the dream, right? But that if we don't re-engage in that process all the time and then continue to find better and better ways to engage as individuals in participatory processes to help us redefine what those collective goals are, then we end up being in groups of individuals talking about things instead of making things. You know? And we can talk about these things more and more and more, but you know the processes have to be multifaceted ways of bringing us together and that allow us as individuals, I think, to tap into some of our greatest strengths and some of our greatest weaknesses. You know, as social animals, you know, we all come with frames of reference. You know, we come with frames of reference that are nationalistic, national frames of reference, or cultural frames of reference, or collegial frames of reference, or linguistic frames of reference. And you know, the challenge in Auroville is that we use our frames of reference as a way to share something with people outside of our frames of reference, and that we get better at both like gaining new frames of reference and also pulling from the wisdom of our own frames of reference to find those collective aspirations that we can actually build together.
Building on what Jenny said, trust is in the, as you pointed out, is already very recognized in the literature, in the academic literature around what we call transdisciplinary work, the kind of work that Jenny was talking about. Transdisciplinary work means we go beyond disciplinary work, which is the academic work within a single discipline like physics. Beyond interdisciplinary work, which would be bringing together different disciplines like physics and chemistry, or even physics and philosophy, to transdisciplinary, where we bring academic knowledge together with the knowledge that is in political systems and societal systems and indigenous systems, and work together with the partners in all of these systems to co-create solutions. And in the literature around this kind of work, which is evolving in many institutes, like Jenny's institute and our institute, trust is pointed out as one of the absolute essential central elements. And it's usually said that it takes typically a long time to develop trust and stops there. And there's very rarely any methodology given about how to develop trust. And I've been puzzled over that for a while, and I'm starting to think the reason for that is if you're trying to apply a methodology to develop trust, you're not going to get trust. It's like, you know, the kid who says, well, I'll give you a cookie and let you play with my fire truck if you'll be my friend. You know, it doesn't work. So there's something deeper than methodology there. And that there is, the trust basically means you need to give trust. You need to be there and giving trust to get trust, and over a long enough time period for that to establish. But thank you for bringing out that point. On the point of bringing out explicitly, I can't say anything about it, of course, but I can say that I think it's wonderful that you explicitly bring out the issue of collective consciousness and conscious collectivity here instead of leaving it in the corner. I think that's a very valuable point to hear about and hear talked about in this context. And then finally, on the issue of what Auroville can do to connect in on the broader scale, again, this conference is a great step in that direction, and perhaps for future steps in that direction, it might be sensible also to look focused in on specific issues where Auroville has a lot to offer and can then bring a community around those specific issues together here and see where it can really connect.
Often I find that more than what Auroville does, how it does things has a lot of learning for people who come from outside. I'm in a sense, I'm through SLI, we're doing a bridge between Auroville and the outside world. It's not the number of domains in which Auroville is operating as much as the intensity with which it is operating in certain domains. that brings in enormous amount of potential in terms of capacity to link and do things. The second part may not be popular, but I need to mention that is also one of the few places where people can honestly say, yeah, we tried this, we failed. Auroville could actually host an annual conference on sustainability initiatives that failed. And because being a research laboratory for the world, people don't accept their failures, because failure is seen as no academics are going to write about it, nor are governments going to acknowledge it. You're, after all, a research lab. You are escaping the dichotomy of success and failure. And it is easier for you to talk about your experience of learning because both are same for you. So it might be easier because these are spaces that do not exist either in the academic world or in the world of any other government. So at some level, sometimes I wonder, maybe get people to come and say, because often people admit this. They say it's only possible you guys can get away with this in Auroville. That's what? People say this, we tried this, it didn't work. So we are trying something else. And this is not done because people kind of have to bring a closure report for something. Here people don't do a closure report. They just say that it didn't work, so we do something else. We don't want to waste time writing reports. But it is, I think it needs to be institutionalized. We are not institutionalizing in the sense of playfulness with some of these things. Because you don't have institutions of this kind. This is beyond the imagination of the world outside. They cannot imagine such institutions. Here you can imagine these institutions. So create these institutions. I would say institutions of a completely different imagination are possible here. And the world is asking for it. When people come here, they kind of look around and say, wow, you are in a time of great human collective mental trauma, and you need places where people can go to heal themselves and create those different form of institutions with a completely different imagination. And those are also required. Often what I object to is Auroville trying to fit into any mainstream model of institution. It ought not to. Because the moment you say we will become municipal town planning or municipal or you want to become a city or you want to, anything that is defined by the existing system, you already submitted to becoming part of something else. Another Auroville is not going to be created by a constitution, act of constitution. That I'm sure. So every time we do not create an institution that is in a new imagination, we fail the idea of Auroville. That is what I think ought to be done at some level. Again, I'm talking as an outsider because I am this very, very minute small bridge between outside of Auroville and inside of Auroville. And often when I look at what all could be possible and what all doesn't happen, this is what bothers me.
When we think about trust, Eric, we trust each other in two things. One is we have to find common ground in order to trust one another. And to me, the common ground is, again, based on some universal human values, which is why we all from such different backgrounds are sitting here together. If you'd invited me to sit with a panel with Trump there, I would have said no, because it's a different value base. So you need that values, I think, in order to find common ground. And you need action. Like if my action is different from the value I profess to hold, then of course you don't trust me. And I think this is what is Auroville's contribution to the world, that we have had value-based action here. And I think this is, again, our interface with the world, because honestly, all of us are too busy washing waste or whatever that reboot does all day to actually sit and rewrite peer-reviewed articles or participate in conferences worldwide. But networking with other people who are equally passionate about social justice, environmental justice, want to save the world from the doom it's hurtling towards, yeah, we would. And the last thing is, I think whether we actively participate in a collective group and collectively meditate or not, I think there is some sort of collective consciousness at work. That's the secret of life to me.
Just want to say again, as an outsider wearing my other hat, that I don't think Auroville is as disharmonious as some Aurovillians make it out to be, but it's also not doing as much harmonious work as some others might want it to do. So, well, therein lies the whole dynamic balance that we talk about, and which we're always striving for. Thank you very much.